Welcome to the show, Joe Dispenza.
Thank you, Luke. I'm happy to be here.
Right on, dude. So I want to jump right into it. I've been doing your meditations. I'm coming to your February Indian Wells event.
That's a good event to come to because we're doing a lot of scientific testing there.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
So I'm super stoked.
Nice.
When I got into your work, the thing that I found really interesting was that in some of the meditations and some of the subjective experiences that I would have and continue to have were very similar to Kundalini yoga. And when I first started doing that practice, it was very transformative. And yet I would hear, the kind of grandfather of the teachings, Yogi Bhajan, talk about what was happening to the pineal gland, and you're raising your, extending your magnetic field and all this stuff. And even though it felt good, I couldn't help but think, kind of, this is bullshit, but I kept doing it. Mm-hmm. I just thought, well, he's just off on some trip. Then I get into your work and you're going, oh no, we are scientifically validating that this work with the energy centers, moving the energy, holding the breath, breathing, moving in certain ways, has this transformative healing effect. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, what I love about putting this all together is that more than likely, if you're studying with like a yogi master as an example, it's a very different bridge between languages. There's a language of this contemporary time, and then there's just language of something that was 5,000 or 2,000 or 10,000 years old, and the language doesn't translate a lot of times. So if we use science as that language, and we can build a model of understanding and make it biological and make it neurological and make it hormonal and make it electromagnetic and bridge those sciences of electromagnetism with heart coherence and brain coherence, and put together this probably a similar model, right? And the same effects, but have it in a different language. And I think science is that language.
Yeah, I think we're at a really exciting time at the moment where you have these ancient traditions that have been known to be effective in transformation and healing, but we're oftentimes, inaccessible because they're a little too out there for your average Westerner,
right.
And so...
And Westerners are practical people, right? And so they're going to want to understand, many people want to understand it before they leap, right? So when you talk tradition, when you talk culture, when you talk religion, and even words like Kundalini or chakras or certain words will shut people off, or they'll have the wrong understanding of them, and so we do our best to rename them as something more biological, something more in the line of science, so that people get a fresh look at it, a fresh learning about it, and then they can kind of build their own understanding. But I think it's important really for people to just get science as that language.
And another thing that I've observed in your teachings is there are certain states that can be achieved naturally and through some of your meditations that I would liken as pretty close to an ayahuasca or DMT experience.
Yeah.
Are there ways in which we can breathe, move, focus our attention that actually releases DMT in the brain, or is it the metabolites of melatonin that are doing that? What's going on chemically?
It's
so similar to some of those peak psychedelic experiences.
So, it's kind of an interesting phenomenon because you have the wavelength of light, light from the sun, light from light bulbs in your house. The wavelength of light actually sends a signal, a frequency to the optic nerve, which sends a signal to this nucleus called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, which signals the sympathetic nervous system, which signals the pineal gland. You start making serotonin, and that's kind of gets you up, gets your brainwave going. You're moving to beta. You're kind of alert, and then at night, the absence of light or the inhibition of light slows brainwaves down, and the brain chemistry starts responding to a change. And the pineal gland takes serotonin and goes through just a real simple process and makes melatonin. And so the function of the way we live in this three-dimensional environment with visible light creates a rhythm called the circadian rhythm. So we're up during the day and we sleep during the night, we dream, we repair, all that stuff. And so when you begin to activate these latent systems, Luke, when energy begins to interact with those latent systems. And the pineal gland has those little tiny calcite crystals, and they're rhombohedron in shape, and they're stacked up on top of each other. And they're in our pineal glands. Everybody has them in there. And when we do that breath, and we hold our breath, and we begin to contract and pump and pull those intrinsic muscles in, it's the activation of those crystals, because the mechanical stress that we're putting against it as we hold our breath and pump begins to produce what's called a piezoelectric effect. Now mechanical stress is turning into an electrical charge. Now it's electrically activated, so energy is going to move that direction. So then, if you do this properly and you begin to electrically activate those crystals, they begin to shimmer like a radio receiver. And if you can suppress the neocortex by dialing down the brain waves into a low level of alpha and even theta, and the person knows how to be conscious in their subconscious mind. And now the antenna's on, now you got to learn how to use it. You got to learn how to tune into frequencies and energies. And so how much time do we put our attention on matter in a waking day, and how much of our attention we put on energy? Very little attention on energy. So this is an opportunity for people to begin to learn how to use the dial and begin to tune into frequency. So when their brain is in theta, they're very suggestible to information, but that information is not coming from their three-dimensional world. The information is coming from frequency, because frequency carries information. So the pineal gland now is electrically activated. It's tuning in when someone locks into it while something cool happens. All of a sudden now, it transduces that frequency like a TV antenna into pictures. So all of a sudden now your brain goes lucid, and you start having profound imagery. Now, when you use plant medicines, the derivatives from the plant medicine fit in the same receptor sites of serotonin and melatonin. Kind of those serotonin receptors begin to become fooled a little bit, or at least altered. In this case now, when all of a sudden melatonin is present because the person has their eyes closed and they're in a meditation, and they're there and they're deep into it, all of a sudden now, when the pineal gland begins to interact with a frequency that's faster than the speed of light, quantum, right? Equals mc squared.
Wow.
Anything that travels at the speed of light material is going to turn into energy. So now you're using the radio receiver to process a different frequency. Well, frequency carries information, so now melatonin is no longer melatonin. The pineal gland is receiving information, not from our senses, our neocortex is dialed way down, but from the field. And now all of a sudden, when it's transduced into profound imagery, what is the physics of that connects us to our biology? And all of a sudden now, melatonin all of a sudden starts to produce an upgraded chemical, an altered chemical, a derivative, a metabolite. And so it produces two of the most powerful antioxidants known to man: anti-cancer, anti-aging, anti-heart disease, anti-stroke, anti-neurodegenerative, anti-inflammatory, antimicrobial. That's what the pineal does. Melatonin's already a antioxidant, but now we got an upgraded, really powerful antioxidant. You take that molecule, you tweak it again, you get a benzodiazepine. What's that? Well, it's Valium. So melatonin already chills you out, but now you're going to get chilled out a lot. And it's those chemicals that begin to further suppress the neocortex into a slower brainwave pattern of theta. Then it begins to sedate the thinking brain. It dials down the survival centers in the amygdala, and now the person can relax, really relax in the present moment and rest and not feel like there's a predator always somewhere around the corner, a problem around the corner. That vigilance is diminished. Take the melatonin, you tweak it again, and you got the same chemical found in hibernating animals. No sex drive, no appetite, no preoccupation with the environment. First three centers of the body. So now they're shut off, drives are tuned down, and now the body's no longer the mind. It's in stasis. It's in a place where it can dream, it can create. It's in a perfect place. Take the molecule, tweak it again, and you got the same chemical found in electric eels. Now you got a nervous system that's going to produce much more energy, much more amplitudes of energy. And we see that in our brain scans during this transcendental moment. These are all fitting to the same receptor sites. But now it's just not one molecule. You're getting at least 5 or 6. And then you take that molecule, tweak it again, you get dimethyltryptamine. It's the same chemical found in ayahuasca, but now your pineal gland is actually fabricating it. And now melatonin already causes you to dream, but you're going to lucid dream. You're going to get switched on, and you're going to have a full-on sensory experience between your ears that's going to feel like more real than anything you experienced in your life. And that brain goes into a gamma brainwave state in super coherent, highly organized gamma brainwave patterns. And the autonomic nervous system now is on fire. And it's processing, and the autonomic nervous system is controlling, coordinating all those systems. It's keeping blood flow going, and vasodilation, and gene expression, and hormones, and enzymes, and digestion, and all those things happening, the automatic system. Now it's processing a more coherent, rhythmic, very fast frequency that's sending a very coherent message to all the cells and tissues and organs of the body. And the person's feeling something that's physical, and yet it's not. It's not an emotion, it's electromagnetism and energy. And it's that kind of energy that causes them to have an upgrade either in the way they think or an upgrade in the way they feel, because the experience rewires the circuitry in the brain, and experience produces a new signal to the body, but the signal is not chemical, it's electrical. And now the person is more coherent, their biology is more organized, and so now they evolved. And so when they open their eyes and they return back to life, they're going to have a broader spectrum of reality, because their brain is now wired to perceive what has always existed. But they didn't have the circuits to perceive it until they had that inner experience.
Right. It's interesting how you talk about the use of kaleidoscopes and that visual, the fractal patterns, and that's something that is obviously inherent to psychedelic experience. But I've also had experiences like that doing really deep breath work, and especially with those long holds when you're holding the spine and activating the center of your brain, and all of a sudden, you're seeing all of these. And so with this biochemical and light reaction and everything is happening, I'm assuming that this is very fertile ground for transforming the way you perceive your life and the way that you interact with your environment, right?
Yes.
The manifestation potential in this place is like you're the artist creating your life rather than your life circumstances creating you.
Yeah. And it's kind of interesting because all those fractal patterns are just information. Trees, everything we're seeing is information, but that's all sensory information material. Now an area awakens, and now you're seeing information, but it's not going to be physical. It's very organized information, because that's coming from the 0-point field. And it's those patterns that actually make up all nature, all consciousness. Everything is fractal. Whether you're looking at a fern tree, the leaf on the fern tree, whether you're looking at the patterns in the brain, and you look at the lung tissue or kidney tissue, it's all fractal in nature, right? So we're seeing the physical manifestation of those fractal patterns, and now we're perceiving information before it's material. That kind of gets exciting, right? But you can't see that until you awaken those centers, until you awaken those areas. Yeah.
Right. And from this place is where we're going to be able to generate that feeling of gratitude and love for a life experience that to our old mind before that experience appeared to be somewhere in the future as a remote possibility or not, but feeling a sensed experience as if that's already happened. I'm going back, I know this is inherent in your work, but I first found this concept, I think, with Greg Braden, maybe going back 15 years ago, of this lost mode of prayer, where you're not like, oh, God, give me this thing I want so I'm whole and complete, but it's more like, thank you, Great Spirit, for bringing this thing into my reality, even though you don't quite see it yet.
Yeah. Well, again, that's the material world fools us every day back into separation. You got to stay really aware that you're not separate. And when you get really good at that, then your thoughts can really actually have effects, more profound effects, because those thoughts are really connecting you to everything. That's the cool part about it. So we want people to not pray in this work to have their prayers answered. We want them to get up as if their prayers are already answered. And it's that kind of energy that really begins to drop a big stone in the quantum. And I think it's cool that people are starting to see these patterns and they see this information, because many people now are having those experiences. And that's why I created the kaleidoscope, because that was the best way I could describe. Of course, now there's so many more computer-generated images, but it was the best way I could describe it at the time. And they're so orderly that if you took a piece of it, the whole is still in the piece. It's just more orders, and there's never any separation there. That's coming from a realm beyond the speed of light. That's order. That's patterns. And when those patterns break down in our field, the expression of matter changes. So when the pattern becomes more coherent, you change it in the field. It's not matter that's emitting the field. It's the field that's slowing down and creating matter. You put a new pattern in there. You change the pattern in the field. You change matter. You see more wholeness in physical structure. So when I've had those experiences, and now a lot of people in our work have those experiences, the moment I see those patterns, I just know something amazing is going to happen, and I just relax into it, and I surrender, and I just open up, whatever that is, and that's again creating that inner vision. That's why the pineal is called the third eye. It should be called the first eye because that's where we really see from.
Do you think there's any validity to this? Well, I guess it's not an idea. I actually interviewed a neurosurgeon, and he confirmed this because he's opened up a lot of brains, but the calcification of the pineal gland, do you find that to be a barrier to entry for anyone that's been drinking fluoridated water their whole life?
Well, there's absolutely, I when I was in college and graduate school, I looked at enough x-rays, and even in practice, you could see the calcified pineal gland on a certain x-ray. And they used to use it as a biological marker. In other words, it measured the middle of the brain, and if it was off to one side or the other side, there was some space-occupying lesion, a tumor, something pushing it over, and it was always you always checked it to make sure there was nothing abnormal there. So it has become, in a sense, a marker, a radiographic marker, and you see them all the time. But I don't think the calcium is like a seashell. I think it's like a toothpaste consistency. I think it's the gooiness of the calcification and the density that creates it. And I do think that, when energy is moving, I'm pretty certain that energy would definitely break those bonds
right.
and begin to turn it into something
in the
else.
same way that same energy directed consciously could heal a bone faster than it would normally if it was just left alone without any sort of healing intention.
Yeah, but think about this.
Into it.
Yeah. But think about those crystals as just stacked like this, and then you have a layer of goop in there, and they're all gooped. But when the energy strikes it, the energy is greater than the positive and negative charge that's holding them together. So it takes a greater force than the force that's holding them together to begin to dilute them into a solute, into a fluid again. And so my point is that I don't want anybody to get discouraged and think, oh my God, my pineal gland's crystallized, I'm separate from the quantum and I can't connect. And well, that's why we do the breath, We want to begin to have energy begin to stimulate it. And I do think that when energy arrives there, you should, our brain scans show that there's a tremendous amount of energy going in there, and I have no doubt that it could break the salt into that kind of semi-solute substance into a more solution-based, less viscous material.
When you're doing the brain scans, are you guys doing SPECT scans or what?
No, we do quantitative EEGs.
Oh, okay, I see.
Yeah, and we'll just keep doing them because we now know that we can induce that state. We now know that we can predict when it's going to happen, and we now know that we can replicate it because it's the same. We see the same exact thing. We're kind of demystifying that mystical experience.
Right. If you can repeat the same experience over and over again.
Yeah, and if I see it in you, and then I see it in another person, I see it in another person, and I see, here we go, theta's getting big, it's way outside of normal, okay, then all of a sudden theta becomes the carrier wave for gamma, and all of a sudden the person just, they go right through high beta, right to gamma, and they're super coherent, and so what happened to you? And they'll tell you the most profound experience. It's not, the subjective experience is being objectified, which is super cool because now it's becoming a law.
When you record your meditations, there's your voice, which is very hypnotic at times. Some of them you go super hypnotic, which I like because it's kind of trippy, the energy center, and it really helps you drop into it. But then there's also these backing tracks. Are those neuroacoustic tracks that help with the brain entrainment, bringing you into theta, or are they just pleasant sounding music? Okay,
so that's a great question, Luke. So we've actually studied what goes on with music during meditations, and there has to be a kind of music that's layered, where no sound could distract you, no ambient sound, you can't hear anything, you hear that kind of full sound. And we notice that when music doesn't have pauses or breaks, but it's layered, then the person will get immersed in their inner world. If we use binaural beats or we use certain things like that, I'm certain now that it's not the beat that's doing it, it's the mathematics of the beat that's doing it.
Right.
So we started noticing then when we're getting people in certain states that even when I said certain words, we could see 14 people go into gamma at the same time. They'd be like, Oh, that was amazing. You should have seen that. And they show me the scans. The scientists show me the scans. So then the other thing I noticed is that I started picking more complex mathematical music. And I could time my voice in a way with that music. I've never told anybody this.
Cool.
I got somebody trained, and then instead of saying it when they expect me to say it, I don't. After I've done it for a period of time, I wait a little longer, and they're doing it by themselves, subconsciously, starting to move, anticipating what I'm going to say, but I don't say it then. I wait another mathematical round or so, and I say it again when I do that.
This is when you're doing the recordings?
Yeah, or when we're doing it live.
Okay.
And then all of a sudden, I see the persons, they're starting to go there before I go there. It's the mathematics and the entrainment and the pace. And then just moving, they're waiting and it doesn't come when it comes to the next one. They're already doing it before I do it. They're developing the skill of doing it. They don't know they're doing that. So then we start doing that consistently. And then as I have longer periods of time in the way that I do it, we notice that beta appears as we experience time, more time. Like we notice time is a big deal. When you're in alpha, time seems a little bit longer. You're in theta, you got a lot of time. Everything just slows way down, right? The time out here is still the same, but your relative time is just a lot slower. So then by drawing the time intervals a little bit greater, I can entrain a slower brainwave pattern. So we've just kind of studied the technology.
So you've tweaked with it as you go and keep refining it.
Yeah. And I got a couple great musicians, and I love participating in all of that and being a part of it.
Yeah, I've been using something for a few months called New Calm, and it's this very dense neuroacoustic track, kind of like binaural beats on steroids. And it comes with a little quantum sticker, which used to be like an electrode with some GABA cream that would open your GABA receptors. Now it's just kind of, I think, an imprint of GABA and L-theanine that you put right here on this artery. And then you listen to these tracks, and it's like within 7 to 14 minutes, you're like, just completely thetaed out. And it's just, it's the most restful. It's like a forced meditation, basically. I mean, I've been meditating for a long, long time. I can do it freestyle. I love it. It's great. But if I have a short period of time and I need to drop in, or I'm on a plane or something. So what I've done with some of your meditations is kind of hacked it. There's one of them that has a very subtle music track. I forget if it's Energy Centers 1 or...
Probably not 1.
No, maybe it was. Actually, maybe it's... no, I don't even think it's in that series. It's... Oh, shit. I forget which one it is. It might not be one of those 3. It might be... well,
there's 8 of them now.
Oh, are you serious?
Yeah, there's 8 of them.
Well, anyway, whatever one it is I've been listening to, it's around 50 minutes long, and it's the same time as one of the New Calm tracks. So I'll put one set of headphones in with your, like, earbuds with your meditation, and then I listen to the New Calm on top of it. And it's like, it puts me in complete Deep Space Nine. It's the most fantastic experience.
That's a great idea.
Yeah, and that's what I almost was going to email your website and be like, can I get these tracks without the music so I can experiment with my own neuroacoustic, brainwave entrainment tracks and stuff? But, it doesn't really matter. I still do them the same way, and they're all good. But I'm just kind of it's someone that likes to experiment and stack different things. And, if this is already good, what if I add these 5 things on top of it?
Yeah. I wish I had the time to do that all the time.
Right. Yeah. The other thing I wanted to ask you is, you talk about the effects of light as it pertains to these states of consciousness. So there's one element of it would be those visuals of the fractals and kaleidoscope effects and things like that. What about the effect of all of the artificial light in our environment, such as blue light at night and some of these things we're becoming aware of now as a disruption to our circadian rhythm?
Yeah.
Does that interfere with consciousness exploration?
I don't know. I mean, maybe if the person has a weakened system already, I think the environmental cue could drive the nervous system in one direction or another. I think if a person's spending 12 hours exposure-wise to these very strong fluorescent incandescence, I think it has an effect on the nervous system. But I also know that, like, if you just got up and turn your light on in your bathroom in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom, you'll start making serotonin because your eye is sensitive to that band of visible light. If you have red bulbs, orange bulbs, dark yellow bulbs, that wavelength doesn't seem to stimulate as much serotonin. So I think the real issue is not all that artificial stuff, which we're always going to have, is actually being out in the right kind of light, and that's nature, right? And opening our awareness and not keep narrowing our focus, but experiencing all of it and being in the electromagnetism of, complex living systems that are interfering with each other. And I mean, that to me, that's the right kind of light. And I think it has a refreshing or rebooting in nature is just should be something that human beings as a species has to do, I mean, I do it. I mean, I travel all over the place. I take my shoes off, I run somewhere, and I lay on the ground, even if it's for 20 minutes, I just got to do it.
That's what I was just doing when Joseph called me. I was out in the sun with my bare feet, and I was like, oh, there'll be a little while. I was just like, I need to just be in nature, just kind of bask in this natural light. I mean, it seems to me in terms of a lot of our degenerative disease, it's largely due to our domestication of ourselves, and our
lifestyle,
our disconnection from natural light and from grounding and from being disconnected from our environment, sort of turning ourselves into zoo animals. Yeah, and I raised 3 kids, and that was just the deal that I had with them. You can do technology, but you got to do something in nature. Whether you surf or you kiteboard or you rock climb or whatever those, they all do something. But it was a great way for them that they could just lay their phone down for a day or for 6 hours and surf or do whatever, rock climb, and just not have a thought about their phone, right? Just disconnect from technology and be out, in that open space, in that nature. And I think it's a really healthy thing for us to remember. In other systems, I don't know if you're familiar with DNRS, the work of Annie Hopper.
No.
She does some work around reprogramming your brain, and her theory is that many of us that have experienced trauma at different points in our life are kind of caught in this limbic system trauma loop, right? This dump of adrenaline and cortisol, and once it's in your system, you kind of get addicted to that. Similar to the things you talk about, it's a little bit different framework. And so she has these different exercises and things you do that help heal that and get you out of that loop. And one of the things she's found it most effective for is people with EMF sensitivities and chemical sensitivities. And it's starting to really click with me because so much of the work I do is in biohacking and alternative health and myself. I mean, I take a million supplements. I'm always paranoid about EMFs and, all this kind of stuff. And her kind of theory is that the more afraid you are of your environment is kind of coming from that limbic system, and you think you're being healthy by all these obsessive tactics to protect the body from outside threats, but really that there is a safety that can be generated from the inside that can almost render you impervious to the deleterious impact of your environment.
I agree with that 100%.
What's your take on that?
Look, I mean, I ran a really big health clinic for years. I mean, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people a week we saw. And we dealt with chronic health conditions. And chronic health conditions require a lifestyle change. Now, you have 3 types of stress: physical, chemical, and emotional. Physical stress, trauma, accidents, injuries, falls. Chemical stress, viruses, bacteria, molds, funguses, blood sugar levels, hangovers, whatever. And then you have emotional stress, traffic jams, internet connections, second mortgages, single parenting, 401ks, whatever. And all those things knock the brain and body out of balance. And so the 3 types of stressors that create imbalance, then you have 3 types of balance: physical, chemical, and emotional. So physical balance would be, exercise, Pilates, yoga, chiropractic, massage, acupuncture, something that would help the physical body. Then chemical balance, you eliminate certain foods, you do the right type of things, you make better choices, take vitamins, take whatever, any chemical drug that help the body stay in balance, like a hormone or whatever. And then you have emotional balance, and emotional balance is regulating and dealing with stress. And it turns out that 75 to 90% of every person that walks into a healthcare facility in the Western world walks in because of a stress-related disorder, emotional stress, psychological stress. That's 9 out of 10 people, or 8 out of 10 people on the average. Because all stress ends up as psychological stress. You break your leg, you can't go to work. Physical stress, you have to take drugs, it changes your chemistry, now you're emotionally stressed. So when we ran the clinic, we were really clear that if you got 2 out of 3 of those in order, the third one would always come around. You get them more chemically balanced, more emotionally balanced, they're going to be more physically balanced. You get them more physically balanced, more chemically balanced, they're going to be more emotionally balanced. You get them more physically balanced, more emotionally balanced, they're going to be more chemically balanced, just the way it works. And what the success rate was really great. But one of the things that people were doing is that they were thinking, well, okay, they were such a perfectionistic, self-judgmental, rigid, fearful person that was eating all the right foods, but they were super sick. Like they had food allergies, they had, acid reflux, they had constipation, they had rashes. I mean, and you're wondering what it is that's causing this, and they're eliminating more foods and nothing's working because the body has been conditioned into fear. So the body is in a constant state of vigilance, an emergency, and the body's believing that there's some danger, some predator around the corner, and it's not a time to eat when you're in that state. It's a time to run, fight, or hide. And so people get switched on to these states, and they can do all that right stuff, and box themselves further into a corner. But the real issue then, if they're eating the most organic, food-combining, ketogenic, vegan zone, no water, the right enzymes, and all of that stuff, they're going to take all that food, they're going to break it down into amino acids, and then the cells are going to, the signal from the cell is fear, so they're going to make organic fear proteins. They're just going to wear that because that's the signal. It's the chemical that's instructing and selecting the gene in the cell. So it's an important element then to address the emotional part because there are events in our life that cause us to feel certain emotions, and we peer through the lens of our senses through those emotional states, and in a sense we're thinking in the past. So the body, if the body is conditioned emotionally into fear, it's believing it's in the same environmental condition, whether it's real or not. And so the body then, in a constant state of fear, is not a time to metabolize. It's not time for long-term building projects. It's not a time for growth and repair, eliminating, assimilating. It's emergency. The cell shuts down. So it's important for the person. We've seen this so many times in our research. Then that they're sensitized to everything in their environment because they're mobilizing all this energy for some threat in their outer world. They don't have the energy in their inner world for growth and repair, and so they're sensitive to everything. And it's their emotions that are actually weakening and downregulating the whole system. So then you throw in electromagnetism, which is now the fourth kind of stress, and the person's sensitized, then you will see them sensitized to things in their environment because they're more prone or more victimized to their environment. And yet, when you recalibrate, we've seen this thousands of times. People break free from fear. And all of a sudden their digestion changes, their pain levels go away, their vision improves, their acid reflux goes away, their insomnia changes. The system gets freed from survival, and now the body moves back into homeostasis, moves back into balance. So I'm not saying that diet's bad. No, I eat well, and I take care of myself, and I exercise. It's all important, but in fact, I react. But the question is, how long are you going to react? That's the real question, right? So being able to piece it all together for a bigger model, I think it helps people then to be more sensible about a bigger picture.
Yeah, I find for myself and many other people that follow the show that are quite aware of, environmental toxins and stressors and all of this stuff. It's a delicate balance between having an awareness and then moving into fear and being in that fight or flight thing. I unknowingly was living under 2 giant cell towers for 3 years, and I'm very aware of the harmful effects of EMFs. I didn't know they were there, but they still made me sick. I talked to Bruce Lipton about this. I'm like, so I could see if I'm living under the cell towers and I know they're there, then the psychological, sort of damage done by the fear and even the chemical damage possibly done would make sense that they're making me more sick, but they still made me sick even though I didn't know they were there, So it's like, what do you do when you become aware? I guess you move,
of course,
but you don't worry about it,
Well, with frequency, it's about exposure.
Right.
You take your cell phone, it's a transistor, you place it up against 78% water, and you got a wave coming through your brain, and you keep doing that over and over again. You do that for 20 years. The frequency is going to regulate different proteins. You stand in front of an X-ray machine over and over again, and you work in an X-ray lab, and you're not taking care of yourself. The exposure over time is going to mutate DNA in cells. So with frequency, it becomes a function of exposure, right? And so, again, I would say then the person that is more coherent in their energy, more coherent in their heart and brain coherence, may have enough of a field effect to disseminate or deflect some of that. But again, that's just a speculation.
Yeah, well, I think it's pretty spot on, because I know many people that are just kind of unaware of a lot of this stuff, and they don't seem to be affected by it. And I know a lot of people that are very concerned about it, and the neuroses of the awareness is almost a double jeopardy, net negative effect, because it's like now oh my God, that glass of water had fluoride and
the moment you judge it, the moment you judge it before it happens, you're creating you're deflecting either what slit the photon's going to go through. I mean, you're making a choice, right?
Right.
So, but I mean, it's there. You can't deny that there, that on the average person that falls in that bell curve of normal, or to the person who has a weakened immune system that's in the low end of the bell curve, or the person who's in a neurotic state that they're afraid is going to be bad for them, the fear of being afraid of what's going to happen. Actually, the body's belief is happening to them. That's why they're afraid. So the body's more susceptible because it's believing based on the fear that it's already happening to them. That's makes them more prone to effects.
As you've developed your meditations and visualizations and all the things that are allowing these miraculous healings to take place in your events, how have those evolved, and why would a guy like me who's been meditating for over 20 years on a very regular basis still have a bum back? Like, I'm going into the theta states, I'm thinking positive, I'm having heart coherence, I'm doing breath work, I'm squeezing the spine and getting that fluid up into the brain, and I'm doing those things. I'm like, my back is still jacked up. What's the secret sauce that you think you've not? And I know you're too humble to take credit for it, but what are the different pieces you've kind of put together that might be lacking in someone's individual practice?
Sure. Well, of course, I'm speaking from my present state of ignorance, but I do see that there's something that happens when people make up their mind. I think your body is a community of cells that's spying on your brain. And I think most people, when they're making up their mind to do something, they're sitting on the couch, they got their laptop, their cell phone, their tablet, they got the big screen TV, they got the remote control, and they're like, I think I'll change tomorrow. And the body's like, he's lying to himself. He's not changing. And when we make a decision now, like I studied enough people, Luke, that had a transcendental moment and a healing that was a result of it. They just made up their mind, and they came up against this constant belief that this could work for everybody else, but for me, and that's what's stopping them from having the experience, right? So it was natural for them to just say, "I'm going all in," and it kind of that making up your mind. They made a decision with such firm intention that the amplitude of that decision carried a level of energy that caused their body to respond to their mind. It was greater than the hardwired programs and the emotional conditioning in the body. And the choice that they make became the moment in time that they would never forget. That's the moment they knew that their healing would begin. That was the moment that they did it with such a level of emotion and energy. The stronger the emotion they feel, the more they pay attention to the choice. And they're moving their brain and body out of their past present reality into a future present reality. The body's getting a sampling, a taste of the future emotionally. And they're aligned. And the healing begins in that moment. And they show up with that kind of intensity. That they're not analyzing. They're not thinking in their waking day, why isn't this working? Why am I this? Why am I that? They're in pursuit. They're in pursuit of it. They're staying away from their same thoughts. They're staying away from the way they do certain things. They're staying away from certain emotions. They're paying attention in their waking day. What is it? If that pain had a feeling, what would it be? They're inquisitive. They want to know. It's information there. What am I not seeing? Am I coming to the point where I should go a little further, trust a little more? And so to the outsider, when you see the person who has the healing, you would think, oh, that person's just lucky they popped, But what you don't know...
that's the way I think about it.
But what you don't...
I see someone get out of the wheelchair and I'm like, I just have a sore back. I can't even get,
Yeah.
It's like, cut me a break here, God. What the hell, man?
So here's the last point. So that person who has that moment, that that powerful moment, you would think that it was just the moment, but what you don't know is what they've been overcoming for the last year, and what they've been doing, what they've been laying on the line, what they've been changing. And so I can tell you also that many people, the pain doesn't change. A lot of times it's almost like an irritant to keep them looking at themselves. It's an irritant, a disruption that's causing them to pay more attention. What am I missing? It's that kind of inquiry, the discomfort, and looking deeper sometimes is what the subconscious wants. It wants the big release, right? It wants the whole thing. And then I said this in the lecture. I mean, I watch people say that I just thought I was doing my meditation wrong. I was so frustrated. I was so this. I was so that. And I realize that they're at the end. They're right at the end. They're doing it right. And they're just going to go one more time. And they're not going to care. They're just going to say, I got to go one more. I'm not going to get up. I'm not going to give up. And they just go that extra time. And then here's the release. Here's the breakthrough. So I think it's a lot of different variables. I think it comes with a new energy. You know, I always go fresh when I'm stuck. I just go fresh, and I also go back to the basics. I go right back to the meditation of breaking the habit of being yourself. I write down my thoughts. I write down my reactions emotionally. I write down my behaviors. I write down what I'm saying every day. I want to get conscious of all that, because if I'm going unconscious, and I'm trying to get this, but I'm not paying attention to all the unconscious stuff, you can think positively all you want. But if your body's programmed into negativity, that thought's never going to make it past the brainstem and program the autonomic nervous system. So I think it's a good thing when this happens, especially for healthy, health-minded, physically healthy, emotionally healthy person like you. It's almost like there's got to be something there that keeps you engaged. It's got to keep you going. And that's happened to me too. I've worked on things, my God, for 2 years. And I just stopped after a certain point in time looking for it. I didn't even care. I got so involved in the effort that there was no separation between the thought and the act. Actually, the effort, the act is what created the experience. I wasn't looking when it was going to happen. I was too engaged in what I was doing. I was all in, right? And so we kind of freshen that up a little bit. We go at it a different way. The whole entire time I'm changing. And the whole entire time I'm getting so happy with me that all of a sudden I don't even care any longer. And I forget that it all of a sudden changes and it doesn't even matter any longer because I'm okay now, right? I mean, so I don't know how to explain. You can only talk, around this. It's a kind of an interesting thing. But I always see it, discomfort or irritation, as us to look deeper and go a little further.
If there's an artifact of irritation, even after someone's had a fairly large-scale remission of something, do you think that perhaps it might be a little karmic hook that's kind of just left in their in their field to kind of keep them engaged in the fight, so they're not just like, cool, don't have to do those meditations anymore?
Well, we see people go like, oh my God, I just had the most incredible experience. 90% of my pain is gone. And then somehow that's what keeps them there. That's what keeps them engaged. That's what keeps them going. So I don't know what keeps people going. Some people, they need something. That we need some adversity. We need some challenge in our life to stay conscious. To stay aware. So I think it's a laundry list of complex things. It's a list of complex things. But when they all come together, that nodal point, that moment where it all lines up. Again, we see people that have that experience and they're completely healed and it never comes back. But now they're ready to create a job and they're on to the next thing. And then we see people that over time heal their condition and then they start going back to certain emotions and they see their condition starting to come back again. So they have to work a little harder and shaving it down and staying there. Sometimes when the people have the instantaneous ones, usually it's permanent. I mean, it really is. I mean, they're just different. They're just different to the core, all the way in. There's
something I have not heard you talk about, and in our last couple of minutes here, I wonder if you could touch on it, because many of the listeners have been like, ask them about this. And I don't know if you're comfortable talking about it. Apparently someone heard you say it at some point, but that there have begun in recent years or months that there's visitations kind of in some of the events from energetic beings or something that is kind of non-material and that is perceivable by multiple people, not just in your head or something like that.
Yeah, well, those fractal patterns, Luke, are really doors. they're dimensional doors. And the more organized and the more coherent and the more beautiful they are and the more complex and whole, the greater the consciousness is accessible to it, more wholeness appears. And so there are numerous accounts, and I'm not this type of swim with the dolphins type of guy. I mean, I'm not that kind of.
I get that.
I'm
That's
not
why
that
I was
person.
surprised.
And when I started seeing them, and I started seeing what was happening, and then people started recounting their experiences. I mean, their experiences. Here's the deal. The being that shows up and grabs the lady's leg and shakes the lady's leg, she said he had no interest in me at all. He just wanted to shake this out, and I was saying to him in my mind, you do realize that hurts. And he didn't stop, and he centered the thought, the pain's got to come to the surface, And then another person that had all these other crazy health conditions, from arrhythmias to skin cancer to constipation to shoulder problem to anxiety. The beings show up and they say, hey, remember when you hurt your shoulder 22 years ago? We're going to work with that first. And the same count. They grab it and they start shaking it. And she's like, ow, yeah, it's got to come to the surface. Then they say, remember the time you had the ectopic pregnancy? Yeah, I forgot. Well, they put your intestines in them properly. We're going to work with those. Hey, remember after 9/11, living over there, how you were so stressed out and traveling? Well, your nervous system is out of balance, and then they work with her nervous system, and she feels them, and then hey, you've had this cancer, and on your skin, and they start rubbing her skin, the whole entire skin, and then your heart, they take her heart out and they put it back in, or this crazy thing, and here's the deal. She's a high-functioning businesswoman, successful, that's not really spiritually minded. And what's the important point for me? Well, that lady who they shook her knee and her hip and twisted her from side to side, her legs were going all over the place while it was going on, and she's a big lady. All her pain went away. Now, the lady with the skin cancer and the arrhythmias and the shoulder problem and the constipation and the anxiety, none of that. She hasn't had a palpitation. She hasn't had an arrhythmia since. She has had no shoulder pain. Her elimination is perfect. All her skin all of a sudden started scabbing, and all these things started falling. I really don't care. I really don't care what the person's subjective experience is. It's incidental to the effect it produces in their biology, right, or in their life. That's really more important. So you may say that person has a vivid imagination. Really? Well, that was really vivid. So vivid, so vivid that it epigenetically signaled new genes and for health and downregulated genes for disease. I mean, that's how monumental it was.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
That's crazy. I love that kind of stuff because I like the out there stuff myself. You know? But as I said, especially when science meets it and there's, indisputable evidence that something has changed, regardless of, whether you can prove, this, 20-foot tall being came in the room and did it. It's like, did it work? That's what I want
exactly.
to know.
Like we have people that are getting their brain scans and there are 500 standard deviations outside of gamma, sitting there motionless, and the neuroscientist comes running over and breaks them out of the state. And you okay? He said, what are you doing?
Why'd you do that?
What are you doing? I was just helping. I was with these beings. I was helping all of these souls that were lost between worlds, between matter and that field. They were caught in purgatory. I was helping them across. He said, I thought you were having a seizure. I was very far from a seizure, dude. I mean, he was there. I mean, so that's real. That's a real phenomenon,
All right. I could go on about this literally forever. I thank you so much for your time today. I've got one closing question for you. You've taught me an immense amount through your books and meditations, and I know so many of my listeners are just such avid devotional fans of all that you're putting into the world. You're helping so many people. Who have been 3 teachers or teachings that have influenced you in your work that you might recommend our listeners go check out?
Oh, science.
Science in general?
Science in general. I mean, we're in an age of information. And in an age of information, ignorance is a choice. I mean, you don't need a doctor, you don't need a teacher, you don't need a priest or a rabbi or a minister to gain any information. You don't need an authority to get to it. So I'm just the type of person, I love so many great scientists because I want to build that model of understanding for myself. I want to investigate it and do two things: produce an outcome when I understand it, or have a mystical transcendental experience where I got to go back to science and explain what the hell excuse my language, what it was that changed me. So science, I would say my parents, just great mentors, great teachers, great stewards. And then I had a teacher in high school named Mr. Galishevsky, and he was my physics teacher. And he taught me how to think, and he taught me how to study, and he taught me how to learn and be passionate about it. And I had one extra class, a study class. Or you get a study class when you're in high school, and he tutored me in biomechanics. And we did all these crazy experiments, and he was just very close. And I read this book on neuroscience one day, and it said, all the different people in our lives that influence us, that shape our brains, And I started thinking of him, and I was on my porch. And I had never been to any class reunions in college, graduate school, high school. I never went. I'm just not that type of guy. And I just got the thought to call him on the phone. It was June, and it was it turns out it was the last day of school. And it was his last day of teaching.
No way. Wow.
And they hooked me right up to his room. And he said, "Hello." And I said, "Hey, Mr. Galishevsky." I said, "I doubt if you remember me. It's been more than 35 years. But, God, I just wanted to call you, Mrs. Joe Dispenza. I want to thank you. For the way you taught me and how you inspired me to learn." And he said, "Of course I remember you," because I got him a little fishing vest, after he tutored me. And I said, "God, I just want to say that you've influenced me in so many ways." And he said, "Well, this is the last day of my high school career." And he said, "I couldn't have ended any better way, because I'm literally just about ready to walk out the door, and that makes a difference for me." So it was kind of a cool moment.
Wow.
Yeah.
And that's a great way to end a podcast. Give us your websites and social media, and then we're out.
Sure. drjoedispenza.com is the website. Social media, Joe Dispenza, Dr. Joe Dispenza, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. It's all there.
Cool. And I might add, just as a visitor to your site, there is a plethora of information there, and all of the books and, audiobooks and downloads of the meditations. There's a lot to dive into.
Online courses, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that too.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. Yeah, if I couldn't get into Indian Wells, I was going to do the online course.
All you had to do is just ask me.
Well, I was just still in civilian mode there, so I wasn't like a podcast host yet.
But Indian Wells, we're going to have a research team there. We're going to measure protein markers. We're going to do brain scans. We're going to do HRV measurements. We're going to measure energy of the room. I mean, we're putting together a really big model, and we have researchers, physicians, and PhDs all coming in. They're super curious. Yeah.
Incredible. Well, I'll see you there, dude.
All right. Excellent.
All right. Thanks so much, Joe.
You're welcome, Luke. Thank you.